to talk about today, we've been talking about vulnerability all month, and vulnerability is really the point of power and possibility. It's where we crack open the shell.
Vulnerability and just being in the moment, right? And as Brenda read in the reading this morning, when we feel that vulnerability, when we feel like, everything is too overwhelming, there is always the power and presence of the divine that is around us and within us, that is that energy that is flowing into the world. And so when we let go and let God, that vulnerability becomes the gateway to power and possibility, right? It calls us to be who we are, to create space for others to do the same as well, and to hold on for that exciting adventure of transformation. We're like that rose that is so delicate and yet has such strength and beauty that Tuck was talking about. So when we think of power, right? Now our ego would have us believe that power is based on our ability to influence and manipulate circumstances and people. Our society applauds self-made individuals who confidently make things happen, right? And while this approach often yields much success, a person's visions and goals may be focused entirely on their own personal success and the physical world of effects, out there conditions, dealing with things. And it's, in fact, they may find themselves acting alone, against great opposition, may be exhausted and unfulfilled, even if they're successful. The unintended consequence of operating from our ego is that we feel isolated and cut off, not only from each other, from that full potential of a power greater than we are, right? We're operating still in that small self with our own will and determination, when the magnificence of the whole of God, of all that is available to us if we let go and remember who we are, right? In the reading from Ernest Holmes today, it said, "There is energy in the dynamic consciousness of the divine presence, which we did not create. We convert it to the action of our thought and direct it for a definite and specific purpose through our word." So that energy already exists. It's like I've talked before about the water flowing through a fire hose, and we're just directing it, right? Or we're letting it splash all over us. But if we choose to align ourselves, then we can hear something different. And Ernest Holmes goes on, "In transforming energy into power, we are uniting an invisible essence with an invisible law, which is the way the universe operates. If we identify ourselves with this source, then our word establishes eternal harmony, transforms everything, rearranges everything to our benefit. It is an act of complete surrender of the human to the divine, without the loss of the human, a complete inflowing of the divine into the human." Jesus conveyed this idea when he said, "It is not I, but the Father living within me, who is doing the work." Right? So when we identify ourselves as part of God, the one source, we choose to direct the natural energy of the divine presence and the power that already exists. When we say, "I am happy, prosperous, loving, and loved," the divine flows into our life as happiness, prosperity, and love. And when we say, "I am struggling, lost, and alone," the divine presence says, "Okay," and flows into our life as struggle, confusion, and loneliness. Right? It's what our intentions are, what our beliefs are. We get to choose either the same patterns that we've been experiencing over and over, or to choose a new thought and set a new pattern in motion. The law will faithfully create whatever we believe will happen with that natural divine energy. And the power behind all things becomes what we permit it to be. We're not stuck unless we choose to be stuck. We have within us the ability to bring all of the divinely created potential within us to life. So authenticity is powerful, plain and simple. We come into our authentic self when we realize the spiritual truth that we are acting as one, that we are one with the one life that is God, and that it is that one life acting through us and as us in all that we do. This is the source of true power. Right? And when we let go of our small separate self and shift our consciousness, our awareness to that higher self, we stand in our power as our authentic self. When we are willing to surrender to who we truly are and willing to be authentic and vulnerable, we set off a chain reaction that permeates everything that crosses our path. Mark Nepo, in his book, The Book of Awakening, he says, the sweetness of living comes to us when the very humanness we regret and try to hide, our seeming flaws and shameful secrets, are worked by time and nature into a honey all their own. Right? The Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa, they talk a lot about acceptance, vulnerability, and vision. In April 2015, Archbishop Desmond Tutu traveled to meet with the Dalai Lama for 5 days at the Dalai Lama's home in Dharamsala, India, on the occasion of the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday. Their conversations and teachings were captured in a wonderful book called The Book of Joy. And in accordance with the Buddhist teachings, the Dalai Lama was explaining the importance of accepting life as it is, rather than how we think it should be. He suggests that life comes with vulnerability, discomfort, and anxiety, but suffering is caused by our resistance to life, by our reactions to people, places, and things, and circumstances in our lives that lock us in judgment, criticism, anxiety, and despair. You know, much of that traditional Buddhist practice is directed towards the ability to be in the present moment and to see that life accurately beyond all the expectations, projections, and distortions that we typically bring to it. The way that we think life should be is not the way that it is necessarily. So one of the key paradoxes in Buddhism is that we need goals to be inspired, to grow, and to develop. But we have to release our rigid assumptions and attachments about how we must achieve those goals. You know, our responsibility is to pursue those goals with dedication and energy, but without the fixation on the preconceived results. Sometimes, the Dalai Lama says, our efforts lead to an unexpected outcome that might even be better than we were originally had in mind. Right? So when we start out on our path, it's not just what we can see from our small mind, our human minds, but the divine has 360 degrees, up, down, wider, higher, all the other people that are involved, all the other circumstances that are to unfold that we have no concept or even there. But the divine harmonizes it all, right? So the power then comes from our part of being the divine. Now, possibility comes in when we are able to release our attachment to the desired results and be in that present moment. And this creates the space to break the mold of what has been, right? If we keep on doing what we've been doing, even if we do it harder and harder, we're going to continue to have the same results, right? But if we do new things, if we have a new consciousness, we will have new results. And that is on the physical level of existence. But the real power of the shift is when we shift our inner consciousness to listen to that inner voice of the infinite invisible that is always there within us, ready to be called upon if we're just still and listen. And from this expanded higher consciousness, we see new possibilities and create a new mold, a new mental equivalent of how life could be. Right? It's about surrender. Brene Brown says, she writes a lot about vulnerability in all of her books, and she said, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. You know, it's what allows us to go forward to something greater. I have a carving in my office that says, I am willing. And it's a little, um, and so I look at it every now and then in my office, particularly when things are just getting crazy. And I remember um, Reverend Colleen Tanaka when she gave it to us. When there's a tradition in ministerial school that whoever's graduating, each person gives a gift to the ministers that are 1 year away from graduating. And so she gave every one of us this I am willing carving. And her dad had made them all. That's one of the things that he loves to do. But she was reminding us as ministers to be willing to say yes to whatever God asks us to do. Right? When we let go and we let God, we see possibilities that are far beyond whatever we can see from our small separate self. Ministry is nothing else, not exactly what any one of us had planned and expected, right? And so this is why vulnerability is such an important starting point for authenticity. You know, we have to be vulnerable. We have to say that I didn't know. You know, there's something greater. What I thought was the answer is not the answer. Perhaps might even be the problem. And so when we're vulnerable, we're willing to leave the comfort of what we know, how things have always been, how we have been taught to believe that things will always be, perhaps even our dream that we thought was what we really wanted in life. But we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And as we entered unknown territory, we follow the divine guidance that we receive each and every moment that we're willing to be still and listen. We allow those greater possibilities with infinite um, opportunities that exist within the divine mind to manifest. The Centers for Spiritual Living has had a global vision that has been put together, and through our spiritual leaders and contemplation of members from around the world. And it was finalized, it started back in 2011, 2012, right as the two parts of the Centers for Spiritual Living, RSI and United Centers of Spiritual Living, were coming together to be one. And so this vision is about a collective vision of an ideal world, that if we were living everyone throughout the world in accordance with the spiritual principles and values that we have in Science of Mind, what would the world be like? And so it's a very lofty, wonderful goal. And but it starts out with these lines. We envision all people, all beings, and all life as expressions of God. We see a world in which each and every person lives in alignment with their highest spiritual principle, emphasizing unity with God and connection with each other. A world in which individually and collectively we are called to a higher state of consciousness and action. Every person then is a part of this action. Each and every person. There is no one left out. There is no one greater than the other. These are the greater possibilities that the Centers for Spiritual Living has set as our goals to be manifested in the world. And so we unite this power and possibility, and it leads to transformation, right? Vulnerability lays the framework for us to live in the reshaping the conversation about what kind of society we want to live in, and to create the space for individuals and the collective transformation that will transform the world. Vulnerability then becomes something to be embraced and honored rather than avoided or diminished. It's a strength rather than a weakness. You know, the power of collective transformation is only made possible through the seed of vulnerability. Through fostering vulnerability in our families of our origin or our chosen families, our communities, and our world, we bring to the surface those possibilities of real and dynamic change. All right, we let go of what we've already known and allow things to be. We allow that evolution to occur. The possibility of transformation becomes more than just words or ideology, but a reality through which our own individual and collective willingness to be vulnerable, to say, what could there be greater? So this is the importance of surrender. Now, our real task, according to David Alexander, Reverend David Alexander, who's the retiring the CEO of our Leadership Council for Centers of Spiritual Living. He said, our real task in spiritual development is not to make a life that works, but to surrender to the idea that there is a perfect life that wants to express as us, right? Now, there was a reading that's in the Science of Mind magazine this month by Ernest Holmes, and he talks about when we're trying to go through this spiritual transformation, it's not about simply affirming, I am a millionaire. It's, if we did that, we're trying to use our principles to will a change of condition, right? Of the effects, the world of effects, which are ephemeral, right? The true transformation is about aligning with the abundant nature of the universe that is already available and surrendering all thought, behavior, and ideas that stand in the way of our full cooperation. Right? So things that we might be clinging on to, like this podium or something that we think is, oh, this is really sturdy. Well, it's really, the majority of this is actually space. If you look at it from an atomic level, there's more space in here than there is solid stuff. And so the world is ephemeral. It's about that energy is always affecting it. And so if we align with that inner nature of the divine, the source that is directing all of whatever is happening in the world, that is where the true change and transformation is. That's what really controls what's happening in the world. And so vulnerability is required to take action, to stand up, to stand out and be seen, as Reverend Laura was talking about last week, and actively embody this vision. Amy Poehler, in her book, Yes, Please, she has a great quote. She says, it's very hard to have ideas. It's very hard to put yourself out there. It's very hard to be vulnerable. But those people who do that are the dreamers, the thinkers, and the creators. They are the magic people of the world, right? The courage to be vulnerable opens us to recognize that we can't do it all, nor do we need to. Surrendering to the realization that we are part of a greater power and presence of a greater love is what makes all things possible. All people, all beings, and all life are expressions of God, as Ernest Holmes said in our reading this morning. That urge that's within us to experience greater good in our lives comes from that divine seeking to express itself in ever greater measure through us and as all of creation. As we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and surrender to our higher self, we begin the inner transformation that unleashes divine power and infinite possibilities. And from this individual and collective state of consciousness, love creates a world that works for everyone. In the last few weeks, we've seen young people standing up in Tennessee, Florida, and Montana who are listening to that inner divine voice. They're willing to be vulnerable and to leave their comfort zone and stand up for their values, for democracy, and for our country, right? For example, there was 2 Tennessee State House representatives, Justin Jones, age 27, and Justin Pearson, age 28, who were expelled and then restored to their offices after they stood up for ending gun violence and ensuring that our children's constitutional right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are protected when they go to school every day, right? They want to come home. Pretty basic. Maxwell Alejandro Frost, who was 25 when he was elected as a U.S. representative from Florida, he's the first member of the Gen Z generation to serve in Congress. And so according to his campaign, Frost wants to help bring an end to gun violence, reform the criminal justice system, expand access to health care, and tackle climate change, right? This is the Gen Z's message. In a recent interview with National Public Radio, he said, I am folding into a movement, not of just young people, but folks across this country, both older and younger, who have been fighting because they understand that the cost of not doing anything is far greater than the cost of taking bold action on climate change or any of these issues. Representative Zoe Zephyr is a Missoula Democrat and transgender legislator who was banned this week from the Montana House floor after she spoke out against a bill to prohibit gender-affirming treatment for minors that she had gone through herself. Their voices of all of these people, these young people, their voices of unity and connection deserve to be heard. Some people have tried to silence these vulnerable and courageous voices, but instead, they've simply amplified their voices, right? The new leaders to create a world that works for everyone, as we talk about in our CSL vision, these leaders have been born, and they're standing up. You know, there's another person this week that I heard on NPR this morning, Toni Morrison. She's an African-American author who writes about very eloquently about life the way it is. So we can really understand what life is really all about, what her experience of African-American people is in our country. And recently, rather than admiring these books and reading them, they're being banned from the schools in several states. Right? Ignoring these voices, but suppressing these voices. These are part of the voices of the divine. This is part of life seeking to express itself, to include each and every person in that world that works for everyone. You know, as I hear all of this stuff, I wonder, what is it for our center to do as a spiritual center? You know, there's so many different things happening, and we're coming back from COVID. We've got people, how do we bring young people into the center and try out different things? And it's just, overwhelming. I can get lost in the thought. But when I was meditating on it this week, what came to me as I was still, and I remembered and experienced that power and presence of God within me and as me. The clear message came, be, just be, and be love. That's our vision here, is to be love. And so that's where it all comes from. And to, in pulling it all together, to be alive is to be vulnerable. To be in relationship is to be vulnerable. To be in community is to be vulnerable. Power, possibility, and transformation can only occur when we are willing to bring our wholeness to life. And when we take the time to go within and listen to Spirit's guidance, we open to our conscious awareness of our unity as one with God and of all creation. From this higher consciousness, we can see possible pathways for ourselves and our communities to act together, to support our vision, and to create a world that works for everyone. Vulnerability is the bridge to that vision. It is the foundation on which we can stand in full confidence, knowing that our own vulnerability serves as an integral part of seeing and manifesting our vision. Let's take this to prayer. And so in the midst of this energy of life, as we are in the midst of this world in the spring that is coming back to life, as the moisture that has accumulated through the winter is melting and replenishing the soil and the plants and preparing for the future, as the critters are coming out and enjoying the spring and moving and being free, we too are here. We are free to be. We are free to be something greater. We are free to remember who we truly are and allow our consciousness to expand to realize that God is truly all there is, and we are a part of this infinite life. And as we let go of our smallness, as we let this divine energy flow through us, we are replenished and renewed. Our hearts are open wide. Our vulnerable points crack open our shell to allow this greatness to connect, the greatness from within to connect with the greatness outside, and to see the greatness and each other. That we are united as one, and to feel the power of being together, to standing together, to letting go of the past, to allowing that desire for something greater to manifest through us, and to listen, to be love, to be that wholeness expressing itself in the world, and to listen, what is ours to do? What is ours to release, and what is ours to embrace? And so we stand up with the courage born of knowing that we are the voice of the divine in the world. We are the arms and hands and feet. And what we are accomplishing is an integral part of that puzzle of life. And we trust that everything else is provided in good measure, pressed down, full to overflowing. Life is good. Life is beautiful. There is divine peace and love and wholeness in each and every moment. And I declare that this is the truth for me and for each one here within my voice and throughout the world. And as we let go and let God, there is this divine harmony that is merging. The conflict dissolves. As we see it all fitting together perfectly in a world that works for everyone. I am so grateful to see this and to know it as the truth, to let it unfold within my life and everywhere. I stand up for love. And so I release these words to the law, knowing that it is already done. Even greater is unfolding. And we anchor this prayer by together saying, and so it is.